I am Kathy Zook. I am the Eastgate Appalachian Regional Commission Program Manager, and you'll hear me say ARC in Appalachian. That's what I'm referring to. I want to thank you all for coming to downtown Youngstown. Beautiful sunshiny day. We have no rain at the moment, which is a good thing. So instead of cutting your grass, thank you for joining us today. My goal is to give you the tools and the information you need to complete a successful pre-application for our competitive route. What I'd like to say is what I'm going to talk today about is the local development district allocation, and the parameters that I'll describe are specifically for that pot of money. Certainly in the Appalachian program, we are very blessed at this time to have lots of money, both on the federal and state side. Probably heard of the Appalachian Community Grant Program, or Power, Rise, Inspire. All of them have very specific criteria. It's not all across the board. So what I'm going to talk about today is only to this allocation. We do have a lot of folks in the room. 3 counties are represented, and I'd just like to have everyone introduce themselves, but in the interest of time, please just tell us your name and the agency that you're representing, and I'll start over here.
Gwen Shavers, Braceville Community Foundation.
I'm Terry Shavers, Braceville Community Foundation.
Gary Newbrow, Trumbull County Sanitary Engineer.
Audrey Lemons, Kent State University Council.
Hi, Katie Phillips, City of Canfield, City of Hubbard.
Zach Teeter with MS, representing Gerard and Lovo.
Wendy DiBernardi, Milton Township Trustee.
Hi, Joanne Stock, Leadership Mahoning Valley and the Regional Chamber.
Tracy Winbush, Tracy's Friends.
The Asheville County Environmental Services.
Melissa on that since consultants representing.
Kate Burke Rosales with the Asheville County Airport.
Paul Molino, Community Counseling Center of Asheville County.
I'm Paul Kurtz from Thomas Folk and Associates, here representing the City of Niles.
Sally Fowle, I have 2 representations, a council member at the Roaming Shores, the Village of Roaming Shores, and a trustee at Rock Creek Public Library.
Lucas Darling, Village of Roaming Shores.
Mickey Egley, West Branch Local Schools.
Dylan Henning, City of Struthers and South Reach School District.
Kara Inandano, Youngstown Lifeguard Academy. Gina Magazine, the City of Girard and CCA.
Elsie Fisher, Potential Development.
Christina Nicholas, Mercy Health.
Candace Mannen, Mercy Health.
Glasgow, City of Portland. Sheila Vandergrift, Glen Bay and Asheville County Medical Center.
Toby Gibson, Brookfield Local Schools. Russell McWade Matthews.
Judy Flynn, the City of Canfield.
And Shade, 525 schools. Chris Edison, 525 schools.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I am going to call a couple names out. First of all, if I call your name, that means I have a question regarding your project that you have submitted. And for those who gave me a brief caption of what your project description is, thank you for sending that ahead of time. So Audrey Lemons, Benjamin Shade, Christopher Edison, Carmela Williams, Paul Bellino, Russell McQuaid, Stephanie Gilchrist, and Terrence Schaefer. If I called your name, that doesn't mean you're in trouble. It just means I need a little more information about your project. So let's get started. The Appalachian region is actually 13 states from New York to Mississippi. It represents about 26 million people. And in the state of Ohio, we have 32 counties that make up our Appalachian region. We are divided into 4 local development districts, and I have the privilege of being the administrator in the Eastgate district, which is 3 counties, Trumbull, Mahoning, and Ashtabula. We work very closely with our sister agencies, Omega and Buckeye Hills and Ohio Valley. We have a strong partnership with our state through the Governor's Office of Appalachia and the office in Washington, D.C., where the main ARC office is located. So with this program, we are an economic development agency with our federal and state partners. And this is the competitive portion of our pre-application process. So Eastgate announced our pre-applications were open on March 28th, and then that process will close on May 20th. This is competitive. I know I've said that several times, so every point counts. The better you provide the information in your application, the higher you will score. And Eastgate staff, such as myself, will make ourselves available to sit with you if you want us to review your proposal at any point during the application period. Or if you just want to, shoot an email, you have a question, this is your time to meet with us so that we can help you strengthen your application. There's always more need that we can fill in Appalachia, and we want to make sure we make good use of that allocation. So please feel free to reach out to me as needed. You're already attending the in-person workshop, which is required. Your participation is required in the workshop, and that we're making changes every year. So whether you've done this for the first time or many times prior, there's always things that change. So we want to make sure you have that information. If your grant writer wasn't able to make it or you want to refresh, we are recording, as I mentioned, and we will make that recording available to you. And then that way you can meet the participation requirement if by chance your grant writer wasn't here today. The due date is May 20th at 3 p.m. You'll need to email your completed application to my attention. And of course, I'll send you a confirmation email so that you know that the application was received. We're always happy to get applications early, but 3 p.m. on the 20th is the cutoff point. And when you're sending your application, make sure it is one complete document in a PDF. Don't send multiple attachments, just one complete PDF. And as some of you may not be aware, if this is your first time applying for Appalachian funds, it is a reimbursement grant. I was like to let folks know that up front. As far as the timeline, applications are due on the 20th. Then we will go into the review portion. The scoring committee meets. We will look at each application. It'll be reviewed and scored and prioritized. On the scoring committee, it is made up of Eastgate staff as well as one representative from each of the 3 counties. And then if your application is successful to move to a full application, those are generally due around October, November. As far as award, if your project is successful, the funds would be made available in April of 2024 to August. That's the award time. So if you're applying for funds this year, they would be made available in 2024, April, August.
You mean 2025?
Yes, pardon me. This is fiscal year 25. As I was saying that, I'm like, this is April. Thank you, Gary. Glad you guys are paying attention. I will say this many times, and those of you who have been through the Appalachian program, you could probably say it with me. But if your project is selected, go to full application. You cannot break ground, go out to bid, or make a purchase unless and until an award letter is received. If you do otherwise, you have just lost your funding, so please don't do that. Okay, so let's talk about the allocation and the match. In general, for this amount of funding, Eastgate gets anywhere from $1.2 to $2 million for projects within our 3-county district. That final number will be known to us probably about the second quarter of this year. So we will anticipate it's going to be no less than $1.2 million. And as far as the match requirement, the ARC program is very generous as what you can use to match with your funds. We are one of the few agencies that you can match federal dollars with federal dollars, as long as it does not exceed more than 80% of the total project cost. You can also use ARC dollars to match with state funds, with your local funds, and also private funds. as long as that's, we don't mean private individual, we mean like foundations or private nonprofits. And then the maximum you can request for ARC funds is $250,000. And there are a few exceptions, and I'll talk about that as we go through the presentation. I would like to say this presentation is for you. If you have a question at any time, feel free to stop me and pose your question. ARC funds are what we consider last money in. So you have a very firm idea of what your project is, what that total project cost is. You have supporting documentation that those funds are committed. And you're just short a little bit of funding there to get you over the hump. That's when you seek ARC funds. This is not for preliminary engineering or planning. This is firm, tangible dollars. And then that is when you seek ARC funding. In order for any project to be funded for this program, you have to meet one of our 5 goals. So with our first goal, it is building our Appalachian businesses. These are projects that help our businesses and entrepreneurs so that they can create and retain jobs. And then also we want to make sure we have a strong workforce in Appalachia. These are projects that assist in, workforce training, increasing access to health care, things of that nature. Really think of with workforces, how is this program going to help me get a job, keep my job, and aspire in my job? That's what a workforce component is. As far as infrastructure, those are the easy ones. That's your water, your sewer, your broadband, and your access roads. And then also we want to build upon our tourism and culture. Certainly with the Appalachian region, we have a very unique culture, and we have a lot of economic development that comes into our area because of our unique cultural assets and heritage. So we want to be able to strengthen those assets and drive more economic development. Then the last one is building our community leaders and capacity. As far as eligible applicants, we're again very broad on this. We do encourage the public-private partnerships. However, a for-profit entity cannot be the lead applicant, but pretty much everything else can be, like political subdivisions. If you're a city, a county, a township, or village, you're are eligible. As far as educational institutions, we're looking at school districts, vocational schools, community colleges, as well as universities. And then our public institutions are, your port authorities and your libraries fit into there. And then, of course, we have our nonprofits, which are the 501c3.
Kathy, were those goals in order of priority or scoring, or they're all considered like the same in terms of like the scoring?
Thank you for asking. The goals are not weighted by importance. They are all equal in value. So now let's talk about the types of projects we have. There are basically 3 projects. We have construction, non-construction, and access roads. We're looking for projects that we can see, feel, and touch, and that are sustainable. Under construction projects, I just want to make note of an infrastructure component. And I'd like to define what I mean by infrastructure. That's the water, sewer, access roads. Not all construction projects are infrastructure projects, but if you have an infrastructure project such as a sewer line and it requires a PTI, permit to install, you cannot apply for ARC funds unless you have the PTI. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have it at the pre-application, but you do have to have your PTI by the time a full application is due. We're looking for full applications to be due of October of this year. So if you have a project that requires it, you will need that PTI by October of this year. And if you do not, you know, things happen, you don't get it, your project will fall out of this fiscal year's allocation and you can apply again next year. The reason being is the state has gotten really firm on this because otherwise you're tying up those funds for a year, 2, sometimes 3. And we have more projects that we can fund now. We'll be more than happy to take a look at your project and fund it when you have that PTI. And then, of course, non-construction projects, those are like equipment, supplies, things of that nature. The access road projects, to begin, I would say if you have an access road project, you need to talk with me before you fill out your application because sometimes we do not have funds available. Nobody wants to turn in their applications for me to say thank you, but we don't have any funds in the pot. The access road funds are a separate pot of money that come from the governor's office of Appalachia. It's usually about $1 million. In the past, there's been a backlog of projects, but you can apply for up to $500,000 for an access road. It does not have to be on the federal aid system, but you absolutely must show job creation or retention for that project. So I would say, if you think you might want one of the access road projects this year, please see me beforehand. And then non-eligible projects. There are things that we cannot do with this funding. You know, your traffic signals, flood mitigation, bike trails, public safety related projects such as 911. I think that is something we can't do. Your road maintenance such as resurfacing or culverts are not something we can do with this funds, and also parking lots. Okay, I wanted to just take a little more of a deeper dive into match because we did have a change in this year. The amount of match that you can apply for is determined by your county designation. And in our district, Trumbull and Mahoning County remain at risk at a 70-30 match, which means you can apply for up to 70% in ARC funds, 30% qualifying and other funding. However, there was a change this year with Mahoning County. It is designated now as transitional, which means it is 50-50 match. The 250,000 is the maximum for most. However, those 2 exceptions that I've mentioned are the access roads and also infrastructure. If you have an infrastructure project that is $1 million and above, you can now apply for up to $500,000 in ARC funds. This change was due to the passage of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. So we are able to provide a little more assistance for you on that. If your infrastructure project is less than $1 million, then you're at that $250,000 cap. And for many of you who have applied for ARC funds in the past, you know this as well. The amount that you apply for may be adjusted up or down if you're awarded. So if you're requesting maybe 150,000 or more, there's a possibility that you may not receive the amount that you're asking for. And I just wanted to give a reminder that Eastgate is here to assist you. If you won't need assistance, feel free to reach out and we'll make ourselves available. This is the competitive portion and you are competing amongst each other. So what makes a strong application? Here we go. In the booklets that you have and also that I know went out in the announcement, Eastgate does have it on our website. Page 15 is our scoring criteria. And there is up to 200 points in the application. So just want to point out a couple things. Certainly, you know, I've already mentioned that this is last money in. So please follow the proper format. The booklet on pages 8 through 11 very clearly tell you how to answer each and every part of your application. Please make note of that because that's where the points come from. And as far as, projects that show that their funds are committed will score higher than if you say, okay, I'm going to apply. I've applied for CDBG funds. I don't have awards yet. that would not score as high as we do have committed funds. Here's my supporting documentation that shows from USDA, I have the funds ready to go for this. Again, it is a competitive process and committed funds will be scored at higher than non-committed. And the amount of projects we can award is dependent on two things. One, the amount of our allocation for the district, and two, the amount of funds that are requested through the applicants as we rank them. I should say, Eastgate, as the local development district, will have our anticipated project prioritization. We'll know that by July, the end of July. So we will let every applicant know how they ended up in the scoring criteria. The Eastgate board will pass a resolution and we'll list all of that. So we'll share that information with you so you'll know where your project has ranked. And then all projects will be reviewed and prioritized by the scoring committee. That goes before our TAC and our technical advisory committee and our citizens advisory board. And then ultimately they'll be approved by the Eastgate General Policy Board. When you submit your application by the 20th, it's really going to be two basic components. It's going to be your project proposal summary, which is a 2-page maximum. That is page 7 of your booklet, items 1 through 13. And then the attachments. And the attachments really are your total project cost estimate, your support letters, your funding match commitments, any mandates if there are any, and then your project timeline. So please remember, number all your pages of your application, and please do not use any smaller than a number 10 font. Yes, I do wear my glasses, but we had an applicant, not in our district, but in another district, because they did their best to keep that 2-page maximum. And I think they used like a font 6, and that is no need for that. But I get a little check all of that every year. So please, no smaller than the number 10 font. And again, keep it in one PDF form. Don't include like other grants or your audit or anything like that. Not be needed. But please follow the format or your grant will be returned to you for correction. I just included a couple links here that's in your in the instruction booklet. They are active. I checked them all beforehand. And now I'm going to go to the booklet itself and give you some highlights of what we got going on. This is the project proposal summary, 1 through 13. This is the 2-page maximum. You must use this format, this interactive form. And now I'm going to point out a couple or several areas here. I'm not going to go through all 13, but let's start with the project title. Please keep your project title very clear and concise and tell us exactly what your project is. If you're doing a water line replacement, please call it a water line replacement. If it's a sewer line, let us know that. If it's for equipment, let us know that. Please do not get very word salady and give us 3 lines or so to tell us what your project title is. ARC doesn't like that. Okay, and then number 3, your contact person. This would be the first person I would need to, or the state office would need to call to say, hey, I have a question about your project, or can you change this? Can you add this? Or I don't see where this is. That person needs to be able to respond and respond to emails as well. It's generally not your CEO, your executive director. It's the person who is the first point that we can get questions answered for the project. And then also your county designation. What we're referring to there is really your service area. So if you're in Mahoning County, but you're also serving in your project area, Ashtabula and Trumbull, list all 3 counties. And then we just went over the designation, the at-risk, and the transitional. Make sure you note that as well. Now, the basic agency criteria, I'm going to go into the meat of the application. So I'm going to go here. Where am I at? I'm on page 8. You don't have to go in your booklet, but you can if you wish. This is the basic agency component. And what I'd like to talk about there is we're fortunate in Ohio because of the 13 states that make up the Appalachian region, Ohio is the only one that has federal funds and state funds. So that means we can fund more projects, which is a good thing. However, if you're a federal project in construction, then you need a basic agency. If you're a state project, you don't. As an applicant, it is not, you're not able to choose what pot of funds you would like, because everyone I'm sure would like state funds because there's less hoops you have to jump through for that. But that's solely at the discretion of Eastgate as the local development district to assign the designation, state or federal. So if it's federal and construction, you'll need to have an agency to administer the project for you. And that's usually this handful of entities. That would be rural development, community block grant, Ohio EPA, the Economic Development Administration, and also the Ohio Board of Regents. I really wouldn't worry about this too much because Ohio also is a self-certifying state. So if you don't have one of these agencies that have funds in your pot for the project, Eastgate can work with our state designated basic agency administrator and assign that to your project. So you do not have to have this component completed at the pre-application stage. Just giving you a heads up, if it's federal in construction, you will need this and Eastgate will help you secure that. One of the areas that gives our applicants a little bit of grief is 6A and 6B, which is the state goals and the federal goals. And this is where a change has occurred this year. The state has new goals. Your link is active, so you can just click on that. And really this is copy and paste. You're going to find the goal that best matches with your project and then choose the strategy within that goal and merely copy and paste. That's all you have to do. Don't add narrative, don't add explanation. They just want to see copy and paste. And then the same thing holds true for 6B, which is the federal. Find your goal, copy it, and then also copy the objective. Number 7 is the purpose, and that's just 1 or 2 sentences. There's an example there. Really what you're doing with the purpose is you're tying it in to the goal that you just selected. And now for the budget. I will tell you 8 and 9 is where the bulk of your points will come from. So let's go to the example. In the budget section for number 8, what we're asking you is to please identify what is the source, the amount of money they're contributing, what agency it is, and the status of those funds. Choose what, for every source you have 1 line for every source. Don't combine any of them. So if you have, grants, you have some loans, you have maybe a general fund, just 1 line for each of those. And I want to point out, of course, the first line is for ARC. So that's whatever you're asking for in this grant, that's what you're going to put here. In this example, we've got 200,000, and we do ask that you round it to the nearest hundreds. So if, please don't put like $200,024. I want to say 200,000, rounding it up to the nearest hundreds. No cents. And the items that I'm reviewing here are also listed in the booklet. I'm just kind of pointing them out for you because those are simple mistakes that folks sometimes make. Then include the percentage and identify what that source is. And this is the important one here, status of funds. We want to know, is it committed? Are you applying? is it pending? Because again, that's where some points. If it's committed, you earn more points there. ARC does allow some in-kind, and I know that's not reflected on the example here, but I'll explain that to you. If you have a qualifying in-kind, you can request at a maximum 20% of your ARC ask. So in this example, we've got 200,000 the applicant is looking for in ARC funds. Maximum you can get in kind is 20% of the 200,000. So that means up to $40,000 could be used in kind match, pending that's qualifying in kind match. If you have any questions on that, please feel free to reach out. And then here's an important one here. Total project cost. Whatever you say is your total project cost, your supporting documentation in attachment A must be that number. If it is not, you're losing points because you have to document what your project cost is. So now let's move on to our performance measures. I have to say, this is new this year and they did not make it easy for you. So I am going to take this link out and put in the old one, which is also part of your handouts here, because I don't know why I couldn't even understand it when I looked at the new version online. I'm like, wait a minute. And this is an area that folks struggle with. Really, that's a format issue. When you're answering the outputs and outcomes, it's got to be in bulleted form. And I'm going to thank Gary Newbrow. He's sitting here because I always use his as the example. This is your work, Gary. It's the perfect example to give. But if your project is like an infrastructure project, this is what we're looking for in your outputs and outcomes. Tell us how much linear feet. Is it a low to moderate income area? Households served, businesses served, buildings served, and communities served. You'll notice it says serve, serve, served. Okay, outputs are served, outcomes are improved. They're not always the same number. So then you're going to tell us, how many households were improved, businesses improved. The big one here is jobs created and jobs retained. Because certainly if you have jobs created and or retained, you're getting more points on your application. That's what we want to see in Appalachia. However, you must provide supporting documentation from that employer or entity, wherever it is, to support the figures that you're telling us jobs created and retained. There are very specific definitions, and I'll review those in the attachment section there. But if your project is a workforce development, now we've got an example there too. So this is kind of what we're looking for here. This is what we're looking for. The community serves, number of students or workers served. How many school districts are you serving? Businesses and organizations. And then we have improved on the other side. Again, this one is showing jobs created, jobs retained. Make note on one section here that says 60 students and workers served, but on the outcomes, it's showing 50 students or workers served. That's because we know the number that start the program may not finish the program. So outcomes can be a smaller number than what you will have in your outcomes. Okay, so that takes care of your project proposal summary. Now we'll move to the attachments. And the first one is that cost estimate. We asked for what they said, a signed, sealed professional engineer. What we mean is that the seal is the professional stamp. That's what we're looking for. Sealed does not mean put in an envelope and send it to me. We had this question on that one. Yeah, it's just a professional estimate of the construction costs. Now, if you're seeking equipment and or supplies, the way you would provide that supporting documentation is you have at least one vendor quote listing all of the equipment there and what that cost is, so that we can say, okay, they said their total project cost is $560,000 and attachment A they are showing how they came up with that figure, so it is justified. Okay. Now, for letters of support, this is showing that your project is more than one individual's idea. So we are looking for maybe support letters from businesses, residents, elected officials, state. I would not ask for a commitment from on the federal side, such as a US senator, representative, because they generally will not give you a support letter unless your project is awarded and you've submitted the application and they want to review it. Plus, they will have no idea what your application is if you contact them now. And we don't even know if it's going to be selected. So support letters, please have them on the entity's letterhead, dated and signed. Now, if you're fortunate to have job creation and or retention, then your support letter would show that information listed in there as well. Not every support letter has job creation and retention. That's okay. This is where those definitions come into play. Specifically, I want to talk about job retention because in the ARCA or ARC's world, a retained job can only be counted if that individual is going to lose their job or they're going to be displaced if the project does not go forward. If they are not in jeopardy of losing their job because we approve or didn't approve the project, that's great for the individual, but it is not job retention in the ARC world. Okay. If for job retention, if that individual is going to keep their job, whether the project is approved or not, then it is not job retention. They will only count it as job retention if you have a letter that says the XYZ company is going to relocate if this access road is not complete. That is job retention. If they are going to keep their job, whether that access road goes in or not, it's not retention. Thank you for asking. Thank you. All right, so match, I think we've talked about that enough. I'm sure you, if anyone has a question on that, again, we just want to know what's the project title, how much they're putting in. It's signed by the appropriate person of that entity that said they're going to, put money in your pot of funds. And then for attachment D, that is the compliance letters. If you don't have this, that's okay. You're not going to lose points on that, but it's definitely helpful if it is, like under a consent decree or from the EPA, maybe from the health department, things of that nature. And then the last one is the timeline. And in the timeline, you want to know your start date and your end date. Just made me think, did I talk about project description? If I didn't, I'm going to have to go back there because I talked about the budget. I skipped description. And this is where both your points come from. So I'm like, I didn't mention that. Because the timeline is listed in number 9. The majority of the points in this application for the project proposal summary come from the project description. So I definitely don't want to forget that one. You can see there's several bullets here. Every bullet is points. Please don't leave any of these bullets out. It asks in the first sentence, tell us exactly what your project is and where it's located. And so don't be abstract. Tell us this is a water line on, Anderson Avenue, so-and-so. And then who is going to own and maintain the project? This is for all ARC projects, whether it's construction or non-construction. Make sure you tell us who's going to own it, operate it, even if it's for supplies, where is it going, who owns that building? Okay. And then as be descriptive here, we want to know what is your linear feet? What is the size of the project? What is the number of gallons you're going to be processing? How many individuals are you going to serve? How many businesses are you going to serve? Much of this information you're going to put in number 12, those bullet points for the outputs and outcomes, still included in number 9. You'll see that this grant application is asked you the same thing, maybe several times, but please be consistent and put the same information in. And then the timeline, which reminded me I didn't speak of this, include your start dates and end dates for significant milestones of the project. Another thing too, make sure your project is at least 12 months start to end, especially if it is a non-construction project for equipment. You might think, well, I'm just going to order the equipment and have it installed. You'll find many times there's delays, and what you thought was going to take 6 months, we are now 12 to 18 months down the road. We all lived through COVID, so you know what I'm talking about. Make sure you have a minimum of 12 months for your project. And then also include a sentence or two. How is this project going to improve existing conditions? And then also tell us who supports your project. Those commissioners, the businesses, your chamber, and of course, you're going to include that in your attachment in section B. So I believe now I have covered all pieces and parts of the application. I've given you the information that you need. I'll open it up to questions at this time. Yeah, I've scared everyone to death. You will have no applications. Yes.
So if we submit a project this year, and for some reason it doesn't go on to the final application, are we able to do that same project next year? Or is there?
Yes, you absolutely can. And again, a lot of that goes to, we always have more need than we can fill. We have many good qualifying projects that we can't fund in a fiscal year because we just don't have enough funds to go around. We call that our reserve project list. And, if a project falls out of contention, yours can go in. But certainly if your project is not funded, you can apply the next year. I would encourage you to ask for what we call an exit interview. We sit down and talk with you about your application, how you can strengthen it for next year. Or maybe we say it's a great application, we just didn't have enough funds.
I have another question.
Sure.
Is there any sort of impact by how much we ask for? So for example, a larger dollar amount, is that in the same running as the smaller dollar as well?
Well, I'll answer that in 2 ways. There's a minimum request. Right. You have to have at least 50,000 and above. Your maximum for majority of the projects is 250,000. And you can see on the scoring criteria, page 15, for projects that provide match from other sources and say you're eligible for 70% and you only ask for 20%, you get more points for that, pending your other match is committed versus applied. Okay. Well, I think that is the conclusion of our meeting, and I hope that I hear from you, and I'll look forward to really good applications on 20th of May. If I did call your name and you have time available, I'm here today. I'd be more than happy to talk with you.